All right. I'm very excited. Again, we are here having the second interview with Dr. Jill. My name is Dr. Sohaib Chikima. I am the Executive Director for Ummah, United Muslim Alliance, Albany. I'm very excited to have you join us again. I know you have a very packed schedule, so thank you. Thank you so much for giving us the time. We are the focus of this interview is really to educate the community more about why you're standing your ground, calling for the end of the genocide, calling for the ceasefire, and also the most important thing, a lot of people are seeing things that are happening around us here, especially in New York. People were telling them, hey, you have options other than the two parties, and they say, what do you mean by that, right? So, Dr. Jill, really quickly, if you could just remind us about your position, why you decided to run for, this the highest level, right, of serving, right? Because you believe in serving, you're not there because it's a position of power. So please remind us of who
Okay,
you are and your
great,
campaign.
great. And thank you so much, Dr. Choib. It's really an honor to be here. So in a nutshell, my background is as a mother and a medical doctor by profession, by education, and after, years in the clinic, it was clear that our health isn't coming from the clinic. It's really determined by what happens before the clinic, really by our communities, the conditions in our world, the so-called social determinants, very much social and environmental and physical and nutritional and all those things. It's food, it's pollution, it's poverty, it's housing, it's those many issues. And I became very involved as a young mother at that time, very concerned about these new epidemics of asthma and cancers and learning disabilities, especially in children. I became very interested in kind of the upstream drivers. And to make a long story short, I learned that you cannot fix those things without fixing the mother of all illnesses, our sick political system that makes it very hard to do mid-course corrections or to serve the public interest, because we have a political system that is bought and paid for by those who are making out like bandits right now, whether it's polluters, war contractors, APAC, the housing, big luxury real estate, et cetera. That's who gives the money that generates the policies by way of payback for campaign donors. So to make a long story short, I got tricked into running for office long ago, back in the year 2002. I got tricked into running for governor by the Green Party. I was not interested in politics whatsoever. I grew up during the Vietnam War, and I saw both parties really as warmongers that were really committing slow genocide through wars around the world, but especially in Southeast Asia, where millions of innocent civilians were killed. So, suddenly when I discovered Ralph Nader in the Green Party, I began to see, oh, there's a different kind of politics, which is of, by, and for the people, public interest politics, or people-powered politics. And to skip over a lot of years, one thing led to another, and this is now my third run. And for president, I ran first in 2012 for the same reasons, really, that I was running, earlier at the level of governor, which is where I had started. And then I ran for local office as well. I did serve in local office for something like 6 years, I think, as a member of a town meeting here in outside of Boston, Massachusetts. It's like a little legislature where you represent your neighborhood in the larger group that makes decisions. But I came to run for president because, in part, we have to run as Greens in order to run locally. We also have to maintain our ballot status by running at the presidential level in many states, but also because the issues that we deal with otherwise don't have a vehicle, and that includes, war and climate change, the environment, the crushing inequality in our economy, and so on. So those were the reasons that drove me to run initially, because as a Green Party, we represent, our motto is people, planet, and peace over profit. We believe that we can have an America and a world that works for all of us, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, as Martin Luther King and others have said. So that's how I came to be running. But in this race in particular, I was arm twisted to jump into the race when our initial candidate had decided to go independent. That was Dr. Cornel West, who has a terrific voice. But when he left the Green Party, it was clear to me that there would not be a strong challenge to empire. If you want to challenge empire, you got to be on the ballot in just about every state around the country. Otherwise, you'll be written off as really a token campaign. You may have a good message, but you can't really challenge empire and genocide. And as I was being asked to step into the race, the genocide was really taking off. My background, as a Jew growing up after the Holocaust, attending a Reform synagogue, it was a very big deal in my life and the life of our community, how to recover from a genocide. And for us, that recovery was all about affirming that this would never happen again, not to anybody, because we held accountable not just perpetrators of genocide, but bystanders to genocide that allow it to take place. So to me, it was like totally unacceptable, crazy making to just sit back and let this happen. I felt like I had to do everything I could and to make this race as strong a challenge as possible to empire and to genocide, which is really an expression of the worst abuses of empire. So on that basis, I jumped in very committed, and opposition to genocide is really the core unifying issue in our campaign. And we are the only nationwide challenge, which is anti-genocide, anti-war, pro-worker, and climate emergency. Those are both, or all of those are very large movements, large constituencies, and our campaign brings them together to create a really powerful and enduring challenge.
Thank you. That definitely answers a lot of questions that I actually literally have written
Great.
out. So thank you
Great.
so much, because that will make it a lot easier for me for follow. So all of that sounds great, right? And the two of us would obviously, you bring more experience into this. That sounds great. But then how do we, as the voters, actually bring that or translate that to action, right? So one of the things that we're struggling with here in New York State, and I know you had the campaign to collect signatures, and it's very important to educate our community about how the number just went up. The requirements for the number of signatures that need to be collected during the petition collection time, and that was apparently legal in the state of New York, right? To just decide to block somebody out, you have to increase the number of collected signatures, and that did unfortunately prevent your campaign from collecting all the signatures. But the great thing is there's always I wouldn't call it a solution, but there's always a path, right? Especially the two-party system. A lot of us, we were born into this, right? I can speak for myself. I'm sure your generation speaks to that. So as somebody who is a voter, I know that my voice matters. So two things: how are you challenging the two-party system? And then the most important question that I get asked a lot, because our organization tends to educate, right? We cannot endorse candidates, but we'd like to educate our community about the options that they have, especially when the mainstream media is not presenting that, right? It's always making it's the two-party system. It's the two-party system. So one, how are you challenging that? And secondly, the write-ins, right? I'm hearing that's an option. So please educate us about that.
Great. And thank you so much for asking those really important questions, Dr. Chekima. And am I saying your name correctly? Is it
Yes,
Chekima?
you are. Yes.
Okay. All right. Great. So, we have more than two choices. The powers that be try to block their opposition, which means blocking voters from having other choices. And we know from polls, there's a poll that's done every year by Gallup, actually, and it asks the question, do you think that the two parties are doing an adequate job of serving the public interest, or do you think there should be another option, another major option? And those numbers have gone up and up and up over the last 2 decades or so, and now it's at an all-time high of 63% of Americans say we need another major option because the two parties that we have are doing such a poor job of representing the public interest. And we know that, from the conditions of our lives, Americans are really struggling, aside from our horrific foreign policy, which is endangering the world including us, and impoverishing us in this country. Our foreign policy, this endless war machine, is robbing us blind, using half of our congressional dollars basically for endless wars, which do not make us safer, do not create a more just planet, and so on. So, that's part of the problem, but also our conditions here at home, because we're spending so much money to conduct endless war around the world. We don't have the money here at home that we need for healthcare, for housing, for education, to get young people out of debt, to deal with the environmental and climate crisis, and the crisis of our water supplies and our food and all the rest. So, we have crisis all around. The two parties that we have are doing a great job of throwing us under the bus, throwing basically everyday working people under the bus. If you're in the top 5 or 10%, you're probably doing pretty good. Things are going great. But for the rest of America, it's really, we're in a state of crisis, really, just about whatever direction you look at. And we could talk about that more if there's more time. But the bottom line is, people are hungry for other choices and say as much, because we want different policies. Elections are a time to have a debate, a time to talk about, well, how could we solve this? Well, what about this war? What about this genocide? And it's just outrageous that both parties are at war with our democracy, and are silencing us and are sending out the police, to violently rough up, young people and everyday people, both on campuses and out in the street. So so many ways, we are being very poorly served. So the truth of the matter is, we have other choices. Now, in New York State, as you pointed out, the rules were changed that made it very difficult. Even so, we came really, really close. We were very close, and we were the only alternative party that was able to do that. So RFK, who is running on billionaire money, he's running with a big money machine. He's not an alternative. He's the same old with a different name. And in fact, he's proven that actually by joining one of the duopoly parties that supposedly he was challenging. But he was the only alternative which got on. So there are 3 official candidates in New York, unless he's withdrawn, I'm not sure. But there are no different options. You got 3 genocidal candidates running in New York, and we are the one alternative to that. Now, we actually, as the alternative campaigns, we're the only one. We got something like 42,000 signatures out of a 45,000 requirement. All the other alternative parties got at most 3,000 signatures. So we were just head and shoulders above everyone else, which was kind of one of the first real indicators that there's an enormous grassroots movement behind having an anti-genocide, anti-war, pro-worker campaign on the ballot. So it turns out that there are other ways to get us on the ballot. So you won't see us with a ballot line. You won't see my name or the Green Party with a ballot line. However, there is an arrangement called a write-in campaign, and we have officially applied for that. That is happening right now. We're getting the paperwork in, so that when you write in our name, if you are an opponent of genocide, you have a choice. And we really urge people not to drink the Kool-Aid that tells you you have to hold your nose and vote for genocide. You don't have to hold your nose and vote for genocide. If you vote for genocide, you are affirming, you are endorsing genocide. You are enabling the genocide to continue. So we have to shut this genocide down, and that has to start with our votes.
Yeah.
So you can go to the polls and write my name in, and we will have instructions, we will have flyers, we'll have educational materials and all that will be circulated. And one of the most powerful things you can do is to be a part of your network, or you can also volunteer with our campaign and be a liaison between your network, your the Muslim community or the Arab American community or the student community, whoever you are that objects to genocide, you've got a network. There's a lot of us. In fact, we are about 68% of Americans, 61%, in fact, who want a weapons boycott right now. In fact, so we are the majority. This is about enforcing democracy and insisting that our government represent our point of view. You will be able to do that simply by keeping in touch with the network. We will be rolling out the instructions, and then we need to get that out in a big way through flyering, through tabling at your mosque, in your community, wherever. There's a lot that needs to be done to inform people, because there are so many people who want this other choice, and we can educate the wider community together and ensure that we have a choice. Let me also point out that Joe Biden, back during the Democratic primaries, had to run a write-in campaign in New Hampshire for various reasons. He was not on the ballot. He did not have a ballot line in New Hampshire. And he was able to win, overwhelmingly. Having a write-in campaign doesn't mean that you cannot win or that it limits your numbers. It just means that there's a little bit more to getting the word out and informing people about how exactly they write the name in so that it will in fact be counted.
Thank you. That was very informative. And one of the things that, my role actually is to educate the community about, whoever's out there, right? And I did learn a lot about your campaign, which I cannot share all of that in this interview. But I just wanted to highlight the fact that yes, genocide is one of the biggest things that actually you're addressing. But I really want for our community to learn more about you, things that actually impact them here locally, right? Because this is one of the things, jobs, the climate, a lot of things that actually you guys are focusing on. Because a lot of people say, well, it's the Green Party. That means climate genocide, right? So I just want to make sure, to be fair to your campaign, that you tackle everything pretty much that actually touches people's daily lives, right? Locally, state, national, and even beyond our borders. So let's move on in time, right? First day, President Dr. Jill.
Mm-hmm.
What would be and I'm going to be honest, as a Muslim leader, the genocide is one of the biggest things. What can we, and I've seen, by the way, again, this is for the educational purpose. I've seen a lot of, mosques, a lot of, Muslim organizations, Arab organizations, a lot of non-Muslim, non-Arab organizations who have been lending you that platform because they understand the message, they hear you, right? They see that you are representing them. The fact that you do recognize the illness that we are dealing with, and the healing is a process. So, but the first day, right? We're all excited. Dr. Jill got elected into office. What can we expect? First day, first 100 days, something that we will be looking into.
Great. So there are many things that the president has executive power to do starting on day one. So most importantly, for our purposes right now, is picking up the telephone and calling Bibi Netanyahu and instructing him that the war is over, the genocide is over. The U.S. has the power to do that. And in fact, U.S. presidents have done that before. Simply with a phone call, they've been able to call off Israel's massacre, for example, in Lebanon in the 1980s. It was over and done with that day, the day of the phone call. So Joe Biden, Kamala Harris have the power to actually do that right now. They've chosen not to do it. They've chosen not to even address the issue of a weapons boycott, which is another way that this can be enforced. And it may come to that, but because Israel is entirely dependent on U.S. funding and weapons and diplomatic cover and intelligence, the war is essentially over the minute the U.S. says it's over. It is a genocide committed by the U.S. and by Israel together in partnership. And as president, our administration will end the genocide immediately. And if we need to, we'll put it this way, we will cut off all weapons until international law is complied with. And that means not only ending the genocide, it means withdrawing from the occupied territories, and it means ending the ethnic cleansing and the apartheid state. It also means, the International Court of Justice has called for reparations, and for the right of return, and for an abolition of the settlements, which are completely illegal. So all of that is in the works, and we will not be providing arms to the apartheid state of Israel, which is in flagrant violation of international law. It's actually against the law. It's against US law as well as international law to be providing these weapons. So this is that's easy. That happens as number one. As number two, we actually declare a climate emergency because we have a climate emergency going on right now in many ways, and it is spiraling out of control. So it's very important that we take steps to bring that under control immediately. And we can do that basically by simply by declaring a climate emergency, which the president has the ability to do. We unleash over $500 billion every year in funding to create the jobs that we need to ensure that no worker is left behind. This is not a choice between jobs and the environment. This is about advancing them both. And we then ensure that people have jobs in the clean and renewable energy field, in public transportation, in constructing the housing that we need, which is energy efficient and coupled with public transit, and also our agriculture system, which needs to be put onto a renewable and sustainable basis. So all that begins on day one. Also, let me mention on day one, we address the crisis of migration. And the crisis of migration, the most important thing we can do about that crisis is to stop causing it in the first place. How do we cause it? Through endless regime change operations, some 75 of them or so since the Second World War, which creates instability and chaos the world over. For example, Haiti, we've overthrown the democratically elected government, socialist government of Aristide twice, causing endless economic crisis and despair and violence. Also through the war on drugs, the US basically empowers the violent drug cartels to have enormous resources and power to create the violence, which sends lots of people running for cover and seeking asylum here in the US as protection from warlords. So, we call for addressing the drug crisis as a public health issue, not as a criminal issue. So we would, for example, we would legalize cannabis, marijuana, starting on day one, and the president has executive authority over that to begin decompressing the war on drugs, which is pushing the violence, again, pushing people to our borders. And the other point about migration is that we need, while decompressing the problem of migration, we need to deal honorably and respectfully with those who are fleeing to our shores in order to escape, the crisis that we have created. So that means instead of building a wall, which does not solve any problem, it kills people actually, doesn't, keep out drugs, which are brought in largely by Americans, not by migrants. It also is very harmful to wildlife and to ecosystems. So instead of building a wall, we use those billions of dollars to ensure that we have the immigrant attorneys, the migration attorneys, and the civil infrastructure to provide the background checks and to quickly process people so that they can be brought in legally and expeditiously and given papers to work. Because when migrants work, they basically make our country and our communities safer, more culturally diverse, and more secure, more financially secure. Migrants do more than pay their own way. And it's really a product of our very screwed up system, which fights migration and which abuses migrants. It's a result of that system that migrants wind up here in this country and can't work. So that's basically what's created this crisis around migration. Migrants are actually, according to one study, worth $7 trillion of economic development over the coming decade. So we're going to turn that problem on its head and decompress the migration crisis and deal honorably with those who've been forced to come to this country for safety. And in doing so, we actually make the U.S. safer. Migrants have lower crime rates. They create stability. They're hardworking members of our community. So this is a win-win for us all. One other thing I'll mention is that we will then propose cutting our military budget, which is now larger than the next 10 biggest spenders all put together. And having such an overblown military budget gets us into trouble all around the world. We're conducting regime change operations. We are now in 3 needless conflict situations. 2 of them are hot wars, obviously, in the Middle East and in Ukraine, and then China could easily become a hot war. These are very dangerous situations. We shouldn't have such an overblown military, and we will be changing our foreign policy so that it's not driven by militarism and economic conquest, but instead by international law, human rights, and diplomacy. So we can begin to create a more peaceful world from the get-go. There are a couple of reforms that we also look to re-engage our democracy. And if you're okay, I'll just mention really quickly, we're going to bring back town hall meetings, because right now elected officials are very busy meeting with their big donors and not meeting with their voters. So how do we hold them accountable if they're not having to answer to us? So by bringing back town hall meetings, we're basically forcing that accountability to come into play again. We're also going to bring back congressional hearings, which used to be a very important source of educating the media and the public and our elected officials. We used to have congressional hearings. Now they're just kind of, dog and pony political theater. So we will bring back real congressional hearings so we can talk about, the genocide, for example, and ensure that people are educated about this where the media won't cover it. And a related reform, I should say, is that we will take the corporate mainstream media to court in an antitrust lawsuit in order to break up the consolidated corporate media that fails to actually educate and empower everyday people. Instead, they are serving corporate masters, and they're basically lapdogs to power instead of being the watchdogs that we have to have if we are going to have a democracy. So those are some of the ways that we intend to basically restore our power, the power that we have in our democracy right now. If democracy held, the genocidal war of Israel, which is enabled by the US, would be over in the blink of an eye. We would have the healthcare that we need, for example, healthcare as a human right. There are all kinds of things that we need that we can afford and which are within our reach. And we can basically spin up the power of our democracy again in order to start achieving that.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much. That was very, very educational. Again, our purpose is to educate, our community and the audience, and which leads me maybe to the last question. You said this is your 3rd time running, so definitely you're not a person who gives up, right? And maybe you might be the best person to ask this question. What if Dr. Jill is not elected into office, right? So let's say, the 2-party system is still there. People will be disappointed, especially those who are seeking change. What do we do after November? How do we continue? Because change is a process, right? It's not an overnight thing. It would be great to see an overnight change, but what is your plan, first of all? And secondly, what is the one advice that you would actually give to those who are seeking to change the system and improve the state of our country?
So great question. This is the really critical thing. And there's so much propaganda that's put into the wrong answer. The wrong answer is, oh, give up. It's useless. Resistance is futile. That is the message of the power structure of the empire. But in fact, it's just the opposite. In fact, if we don't push for change, it won't happen. And for me, in my little old personal experience, over the course of, it was 2012. So really 12 years, we've gone from we tripled our vote between my first race and my third race. And now we have way more momentum. Why is there more momentum? It's because, not being on the payroll of the war industry and AIPAC, we've had clear vision. As the Green Party, we don't take money from corporations. We don't use the loopholes for billionaires to donate $1 million at a time. We don't work with super PACs. We are a people-powered party, so we can represent what people actually want. And so we've been able to see where we've been going. We took a position on Israel and the apartheid state, and a position in support of BDS on Israel starting in 2006. Why do we have advanced vision? It's because we don't have the blockage of big money confusing us in this party. As the American people, most American people don't have that confusion either. It's clear about what we need. So let me quote two people who've been they're sort of guidelines for me. One is Frederick Douglass, the abolitionist, who said, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. We have to be that demand. We have to be that demand about stopping genocide. Look, if we even just got to 5% or 10% or 15%, which is entirely feasible. I mean, it's actually feasible because there are going to be 3 genocidal candidates on most states. They're going to be splitting the pro-genocide vote. We're unifying the anti-genocide, anti-war, pro-worker, climate emergency vote. If word gets out and we do our homework, which is to make those phone calls, get out and table and flyer, it's entirely possible that this election could be turned on its head. 1 out of every 3 voters in 2020 in the presidential race, 1 out of every 3 eligible voters did not vote because most people don't like where this political system of war and Wall Street is driving us. Most Americans don't like it, especially lower income, younger, and of color. Those are the people who tend not to vote. So by getting word out in our communities, we can mobilize a lot of people, make sure that people are registering to vote, and that the disenfranchised voters are coming out and reclaiming our democracy. So just remember, when they tell you it's hopeless, it's because they're terrified. They're terrified. They're quaking in their boots because they know that their days are numbered. And why are their days numbered? Because, empire is over. Empire is absolutely unsustainable. It's unsurvivable for all of us. Gaza is kind of a microcosm of what the abuses of empire. Israel, according to Ronald Reagan's Secretary of Defense, Israel is the unsinkable battleship for the U.S. empire in the Middle East. So we need to move from a monopolar world, a world controlled by the US, or we think we control it, to a multipolar world, a world in which we are among the adults in the room that are working together in a collaborative way, according to international law, human rights, and with diplomacy, to create the world that we need. So we can do that. That is within our reach. The American people are hungry for it. As Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. By bringing that demand into the political arena, we bring enormous momentum to it. And whatever happens on November 5th, we are at it on November 6th, basically. We don't stop. If we get in the White House, we also don't stop, because we'll need support more than ever to deal with what will be coming down on our heads, when we actually challenge the system, which is what we have to do. And the other quote that I want to leave you with is from Alice Walker, the poet and the novelist, who said that the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing that we have it to start with. We cannot let ourselves be talked out of power. Remember, we are 68% who want an end to the genocide. We are 61% who want to end, they want a weapons boycott right now. It's 44 million young people who are locked into student debt. We would basically bail out the students in the same way that Democrats and Republicans bailed out Wall Street. We would be bailing out not the crooks who got us into this mess. We'd be bailing out young people who've been victims of it. There are approximately 87 million Americans right now who do not have adequate health care or adequate health insurance. That's a lot of people. And when they learn that we actually have a system called Medicare for All that will provide quality care and cut the cost by 30%, which is just the waste and the red tape and the bureaucracy in the current healthcare system. When this gets to be a huge number of people, that not only assert our weight, but we could potentially win this election. But say we don't win it, say we just win, say 5 or 10%, that is huge too, because that is a shot across the bow. Let me say, every vote against genocide is a shot across the bow of the empire to let them know that we are here, we are coming, we are not going away, and we are getting organized. It tells them which way the wind is blowing. That in itself will change policy. Plus, we don't roll over, after election day. We don't, quote, go back to brunch. We continue the movement, whether it's under Kamala Harris or whether it's under Donald Trump, either of them. They are genociders, they are imperial power, they are supporters of Wall Street. We continue the fight. And by continuing that fight, it's not only an electoral fight, and we'll be focusing especially on local office. That's, as Greens, we've elected, contrary to the mythology, we've actually elected over 1,500 local elected officials. Now, the Democrats come out in force to block us every time, even for local races, but we still have been able to win many local races, and our power gets stronger as more and more people wake up to the realities of life and the future under empire and genocide as a way of life. So we are getting stronger. We're not going away. Every vote is a shot across the bow of empire. Every vote is a success for an America and a world that works for all of us, that starts by ending genocide and endless war, and goes on to actually create a world that will work for all of us, that puts people, planet, and peace over profit. This is within our reach. If you go to jillstein2024.com, you can sign up there and also work with us directly. You can also work with your local networks, with your mosque, with your activist group, whatever it is. All of this is good, but it doesn't hurt to also get on our pipeline as well directly at jillstein2024.com.
Thank you. That was going to be my question, but again, you tend to answer my questions even before I ask them. So maybe one thing that I will conclude with, we appreciate a message, and we would appreciate a message that maybe could be directed to our community, especially those, and you did actually allude to this, but maybe now it's like maybe it's a summary slash a message to those who really don't feel like, what, my voice is going to make a difference. And let's be honest, a lot of people come from that background that, what, elections are bought. It doesn't matter if I go out, even if my voice is counted, it's nothing. What is the one thing that you would, or a message that you would to send to these people that feel they are insignificant?
What you described is exactly what the war machine wants you to believe. That is exactly what AIPAC would like you to believe. It is what, the Democratic Party with its billionaire funders would like you to believe, that resistance is futile, you don't count. But the reality is your point of view opposing this genocide and the endless war machine, which is endangering all of us and impoverishing us, all of us around the world, including right here in this country, using up half of our congressional discretionary dollars. In fact, that's what they want you to believe. They want you to think that you need to be hopeless, because if you're hopeless, you will be powerless. But in fact, our power is our vote. In a democracy, that's our vote. The system is quite corrupt, so it requires inordinate effort to fight back. But we have a very powerful movement now, which has been forged in the face of genocide. There is no more powerful a time for us to be overthrowing this corrupt and violent system than right now. If we don't do that, we are inviting this system to continue on its merry way. And we're all in the target hairs of this system, ultimately, in many ways that I don't think we need to go into right now, but there are so many points of failure right now in this system. If we do not stand up, we know what our trajectory is, and we're not long for this world, whether you're looking at, escalation towards nuclear conflict in several areas around the world, an economy that does not support working people, housing, half of Americans right now are within a paycheck or two of losing their housing, our healthcare emergencies, et cetera, the fact of debt. We have become a terminally dysfunctional society, or to look at climate change also, which is just, spinning out of control. So there are many ways right now that the current system has designed for us all to go down with the ship. So unless you're comfortable with that, unless you're okay about, a slow genocide, engulfing us all and our children in particular, as a medical doctor, and I don't know, Dr. Chekima, are you a medical doctor? Are you
PhD?
PhD? Okay, all right. Well, I'm sure you have your own version of this, but certainly in the healthcare field, we see people who are confronted by mortality all the time, and I'm sure you do, just within your mosque and your own, religious circles. We see people who are confronted by terminal threats to themselves or their family. And when you're actually facing that, invariably people are going to want to embrace life and, find solutions that support our lives, our families' lives, our communities' lives. We always do. Right now, it's a couple steps away from us. The genocide is a couple steps away, but it is coming towards us, through many means, whether it's the abuses of empire or it's the cost of empire on everything else. But we're all being, we're all going into the meat grinder right now, at various speeds, and this is completely unacceptable. So it's really important that we stand up. We reject this propaganda of powerlessness. We assert the power that we have. We have the numbers, we have the solutions, we have the values of the American people. We can do this. And the key thing is to flick the switch in your own brain from powerless to powerful. Because once we have the courage of our convictions, we become unstoppable together. We can actually do this even in this election. We could win this election, but whether we win the office or we win the day by advancing our political power for an America and a world that works for all of us, this is within our reach if we deem to make it so.
Thank you so much. Indeed, powerful ending for our interview. I really enjoyed it. Very educational, very insightful, and very empowering, because it's all about the power. It's all about our voices. Thank you, Dr. Jill. One day, maybe sooner than we think, we might be calling you President. Dr. Jill. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Definitely, the community really appreciates all this, and best of luck.
And I so appreciate your educating and empowering the community to do the right thing for itself and for all of us and our future. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.